The church was silent when Rose collapsed at the altar. Not from nerves. Not from emotion. But from something far more dangerous. Minutes later, a stranger wiped the makeup from her face, and exposed bruises no one was supposed to see. What happened next didn't stop a wedding. It triggered a chain reaction involving power, violence, and a man who doesn't forgive. Because the moment Rose stood up, someone else decided she would pay for it. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Find a comfortable place, let the noise of the day fade away, and allow yourself to slow down. This isn't a story meant to rush past you, it's one meant to be felt. Every moment, every choice, every quiet turning point matters. If you're ready to step into a story about courage, kindness, and the strength it takes to stand up when silence feels safer, go ahead and hit the subscription button now. It helps this channel grow and ensures you never miss stories like this one. Now relax, take a breath, and enjoy the story. The church bells rang longer than Rose expected. Their final chime echoed through the vaulted ceiling, vibrating in the air like something alive, something that refused to settle. It should have felt sacred, triumphant, final. Instead, the sound pressed down on her chest, heavy and insistent, as if each note carried a warning she was trying not to hear. The church was full. Family, friends, business associates, people who had traveled across states to witness this moment. The pews were packed with quiet anticipation, polished shoes, folded programs, restrained smiles. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be. That was the problem. Rose stood at the altar wrapped in layers of ivory lace that had once belonged to her grandmother. The dress had been restored thread by thread, altered with reverence, spoken about with admiration. A symbol of tradition, continuity, legacy. People had told her she looked timeless. She felt trapped. The fabric was heavier than she remembered when she tried it on weeks earlier. The air beneath the lights was warmer. Her skin prickled beneath the fitted bodice, her breath catching just slightly too high in her chest. Her fingers were locked inside John's hand. His grip was firm. Too firm. The kind of grip that didn't reassure but restrained. She could feel the tension in him, the tight control he maintained even now. Not nerves. Not excitement. Something colder. Impatient. Possessive. She shifted her weight subtly, trying to relieve the pressure building behind her eyes. The minister's voice flowed steadily through the space, practiced and smooth, filling the silence with words about devotion and unity and shared futures. Rose recognized the phrases. She had heard them at other weddings, watched other brides smile through them. Now they passed through her without meaning, like sound through glass. Her heart was beating too fast. She focused on breathing, the way she had practiced the night before while standing alone in the bathroom. Inhale. Exhale. Smile. Don't fidget. Don't look uncertain. Don't ruin this. Don't draw attention. The lights above the altar felt harsh now, pressing heat against her scalp and shoulders. Her vision blurred at the edges, not enough to panic her at first. She told herself it was normal. People always said weddings were overwhelming. Emotional. Exhausting. This wasn't that. A faint wave of dizziness rolled through her, slow and unsettling. The marble beneath her feet felt farther away than it should have. The air seemed thicker, harder to pull into her lungs. The room tilted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough to make her stomach lurch and her knees soften. Rose tightened her grip on John's hand instinctively, seeking balance, anchoring herself to the one solid thing nearby. He glanced down at her. The look on his face wasn't concern. It was irritation, quick and sharp, gone almost as soon as it appeared. If anyone else noticed it, they didn't react. She noticed. Her mouth opened to speak, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't form. Her legs felt strangely hollow, as if the strength had drained out of them without warning. Light. That's how she felt. Weightless in the worst possible way. And then her knees buckled. The world dropped away beneath her. White marble rushed upward, cold and unforgiving. Someone gasped. Someone said her name, a sharp intake of breath slicing through the quiet. Rose barely registered it. The last thing she heard before everything went black was John's voice, low and edged with annoyance. Jesus Christ, Rose. Not now. Silence swallowed her. For a moment, seconds, maybe longer, there was nothing at all. No sound. No light. Just a heavy floating darkness that felt oddly calm compared to the pressure she'd been holding inside. When awareness returned, it came in fragments. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Not flowers. Not incense. Not the faint perfume of polished wood and old stone that clung to the church. This was different. Leather. Dark wood. Something deeper beneath it. Her eyelids fluttered open slowly. The ceiling above her wasn't vaulted or white. It was paneled, dark and close, catching soft light from somewhere out of sight. The brightness was gentler here, angled, not glaring. Her head throbbed. She tried to move. A single word cut through the fog in her mind with startling clarity. Don't. Rose's eyes shifted toward the voice. Someone was close. Close enough that she could sense his presence before fully seeing him. He was kneeling beside her, partially in shadow, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch even through the lingering haze. Dark eyes. Nearly black. Sharp features that looked carved rather than softened by time. There was nothing gentle about his face, but there was control. Stillness. The kind that came from experience rather than authority. Don't move, he said again, calm and firm. She tried anyway. Instinct pushed her to sit up, to orient herself, to regain control of her body. A large hand pressed gently but decisively against her shoulder, keeping her down. It wasn't marble beneath her. It was leather. Where am I? Rose asked. Her voice sounded thin, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. The rector's office, the man replied. You went down hard. I caught you. The word caught echoed strangely in her chest, unsettling in a way she couldn't quite name. Her eyes adjusted, taking in the room around her. Dark wood walls. Heavy furniture arranged with purpose, not decoration. A desk stood near a tall window, and on it sat a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid that caught the light. Untouched. The man shifted slightly, and she noticed his suit. Tailored. Expensive without being loud. The kind of clothing that didn't try to impress because it didn't need to. I'm Rock, he said. You didn't hit the floor. Panic surged through her chest all at once. Rose's hand flew to her face. My makeup. It was smeared, Rock said evenly. I removed it. Her breath hitched sharply. You were overheating, he continued. I needed to see if you were injured. The room tilted again, sharper this time. Her makeup. The foundation she'd applied carefully that morning. The concealer she'd pressed into place with practiced precision. The powder meant to blur, soften, hide. You had no right, she whispered, trying to push herself upright. Her arms felt weak, unreliable, as if they didn't quite belong to her. Rock didn't flinch. I had every right, he said. You collapsed at your own wedding. He leaned back slightly, giving her space she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. That's when she saw it. A white hand towel rested on the side table beside the couch. It was smeared with beige makeup. And something darker. Something that made her stomach twist painfully. The real question, Rock said quietly, his voice lower now, heavier, is what your fiancé did to put bruises on your face. Rose's fingers trembled as they touched her cheekbone. The skin was tender beneath her touch, swollen in a way no amount of makeup could fully hide. She had tried anyway. She had practiced smiling until she believed it looked normal. "I fell," she said automatically. The lie slid out easily. She had rehearsed it. Rock's mouth curved slightly, but there was no humor in it. "Of course you did," he said. "Just like you fell into marrying a man who treats you like a transaction he's mildly disappointed in." The words landed hard, settling somewhere deep in her chest. She wanted to argue, to defend John, to explain that he was stressed, that everything was complicated, that this wasn't who he really was. She couldn't. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. And beneath it all, one truth pressed quietly but relentlessly at the edges of her mind. This wasn't nerves. And the bruise mattered more than anyone knew. The room felt smaller now. Not because the walls had moved, but because the truth had. Rose sat upright on the leather couch, her spine stiff, her hands folded tightly in her lap as if holding herself together required constant effort. The haze from the collapse had lifted, replaced by something sharper and far more painful clarity. Rock remained a few steps away, not crowding her, not retreating either. He leaned lightly against the edge of the desk, arms loose at his sides, watching her with a kind of attention that made it impossible to pretend nothing was wrong. Her face felt exposed. Not bare, exposed. The absence of makeup was more than physical. It felt like standing in public without skin, every imperfection suddenly loud. She could still feel the phantom pressure of the sponge she'd used that morning, the careful layering, the practiced motions meant to smooth everything into something acceptable. Armor, she realized. That was exactly what it had been. She swallowed and looked down at her hands. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "Removed the makeup?" Rock asked. She nodded. "It wasn't about appearance," he replied. "It was about heat and injury." "That's not the same thing," Rose said. Her voice shook despite her effort to steady it. "You didn't know what you were wiping away." Rock's gaze didn't waver. "I knew exactly what I was wiping away." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. And for the first time, she saw something flicker there, not judgment, not anger, but recognition. The bruise had fully emerged now in the softer light of the room. Purple and yellow blooming along her cheekbone, faint but undeniable. No clever blending. No distraction. Just truth, sitting plainly on her skin. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Rose spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told you. I fell." Rock exhaled slowly through his nose, as if tempering something inside himself. "I've heard that sentence before," he said. "Too many times." She stiffened. "My sister used to say it," he continued quietly. "She fell into counters. Fell into door frames. Fell down stairs." Rose's chest tightened. "She wore makeup the same way you did," Rock said. "Carefully. Strategically. Like if she applied it just right, the world wouldn't ask questions." The words struck something deep and raw. What happened to her? Rose asked, though a part of her already knew she didn't want the answer. Rock straightened slightly, pushing away from the desk. "She married a man who everyone respected. Successful. Polished. Generous in public." His jaw tightened. "Private cruelty is always quieter." Rose's fingers curled inward, nails pressing into her palms. She told herself it was manageable, he went on. That love meant patience. That endurance was the same thing as strength. He paused, just long enough for the weight of his words to settle. "She died." The room seemed to tilt again, though Rose didn't move. "He pushed her during an argument," Rock said. "Not even a big one. Something meaningless. She fell the wrong way. Broke her neck." Rose sucked in a sharp breath. "I didn't see it," Rock said, his voice steady but edged with something dangerous. "Not until it was too late. And I've lived with that ever since." "I'm sorry," Rose whispered. "Don't be," he replied immediately. Be honest. She flinched. You're not clumsy, Rock said. And you're not weak. You're trapped. The word hit her harder than the bruise ever had. I'm not, she began, then stopped. The protest withered before it fully formed. Her entire body felt suddenly heavy, like gravity had doubled. You're marrying him anyway, Rock continued. Which tells me you've convinced yourself there's no alternative. Rose stared at the floor. My father's company is failing, she said quietly. John's family offered to help. Not out of kindness. Out of leverage. Rock nodded once, as if confirming something he already suspected. My mother thinks this wedding fixes everything, Rose went on. She thinks stability is worth any cost. And you? Rock asked. Rose's throat tightened. I think I don't get a vote. Silence returned, thicker now. Rock crossed the room slowly, stopping a few feet away. He didn't touch her. Didn't reach out. His restraint felt deliberate. You think survival means endurance, he said. It doesn't. It means escape. Her heart pounded. I can't just walk away, she said. I destroy my family. And if you stay, Rock replied evenly, you destroy yourself. The words landed with quiet finality. A knock echoed suddenly against the door, sharp and impatient. Rose! Her mother's voice called from the hallway. What is going on in there? Rose's pulse spiked. Rock didn't look at the door. His eyes stayed locked on hers. How long have I been gone? Rose asked. Long enough for people to start asking questions, he said. Another knock, harder this time. Rose, her mother snapped. John is furious. Rock stepped between Rose and the door without hesitation, his presence filling the space. You have 10 seconds, he said quietly. 10 seconds for what? Rose asked, her voice trembling. To decide whether you keep surviving, Rock replied, or whether you start living. Her mother's hand rattled the handle. Rose, open this door right now. Rose's chest felt too tight to breathe. 10 seconds. The number felt absurd. Cruel. Impossible. She looked at Rock, this man who was suddenly far more than a stranger, far more than a bystander. And for the first time, the fear shifted. Because beneath it, something else was waking up. Recognition. And the terrifying possibility that he was right. The door handle rattled again. Harder this time. Rose felt the vibration travel through the room, through the thick wood, straight into her chest. Each sharp movement sounded less like impatience and more like demand. Like the door itself was being reminded who controlled it. Rose, her mother called, her voice tight now, stripped of its practiced warmth. Open this door. This has gone far enough. Rose stood frozen near the couch, her arms wrapped around herself, fingers digging into the lace at her elbows. The room felt charged, the air thick with the weight of unspoken consequences. Behind that door waited everything she had been trained to obey. Expectations. Appearances. Obligation dressed up as love. Rock stood between her and the door, not touching it, not blocking it with force, but with certainty. His presence alone felt like resistance. John is humiliated, her mother continued. People are starting to whisper. Do you have any idea what you're doing to us? Rose squeezed her eyes shut. The word us echoed painfully. She pictured her mother's face, tight smile, clenched jaw, eyes scanning the room for damage to control. She pictured John's impatience, the way his temper simmered just beneath civility. She pictured the reception hall, filled with people pretending not to notice that the bride had vanished. Her mother knocked again. This wedding is bigger than you, she said sharply. You don't get to ruin it because you're overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. The word felt insulting in its smallness. Rose opened her eyes and looked at Rock. He hadn't moved. He hadn't rushed her. He hadn't spoken over her fear or filled the silence with promises. He simply watched her, steady and unyielding, as if he understood that this moment belonged to her alone. "What happens if I don't open it?" Rose asked quietly. Rock answered without hesitation. "Then you stop pretending." Another sharp knock. "Rose," her mother snapped. "Open this door right now." Her heart hammered so loudly, she was sure they could hear it through the walls. "I can't just walk away," Rose whispered, more to herself than to him. "I'll destroy everything. My father's business. My mother's standing. John's family." "We'll survive," Rock said calmly. "They always do." She shook her head, panic rising. "You don't understand. I'll be blamed. I'll be the ungrateful one. The unstable one. The girl who couldn't handle the pressure." Rock took a step closer, still careful not to crowd her. "You already are," he said. "You're just quieter about it." The door rattled again, followed by John's voice now, low and sharp. "Rose, open the damn door." Her stomach twisted. That tone. That certainty. It pulled at years of conditioning, years of instinct telling her to smooth things over, to comply before anger escalated. Rock's voice cut through the spiral. "You have a choice," he said. "Right now." She laughed softly, a broken sound. "It doesn't feel like one." "It is," he replied. "It just has consequences." Silence pressed in around them. 10 seconds, Rock said quietly. 10 seconds to do what? Rose asked, her voice trembling. "To decide whether you step back into that room and let this continue," he said, "or whether you trust me to handle what happens next." Her breath caught. "Trust you how?" she asked. Rock met her eyes, and something in his expression shifted, not softer but deeper. "I don't make offers I can't keep," he said. "I won't promise you it'll be easy. I won't promise people won't be angry. But I will promise you this, if you walk away from that door, you won't be alone." The door shook again. "Rose." John barked. "This ends now." Her hands were shaking openly now. She thought of the bruise on her face. The makeup she'd layered over it like armor. The way she'd practiced smiling until her reflection looked convincing enough to survive. This wasn't nerves. This wasn't cold feet. This was her body refusing to go quietly back into a cage. Rock didn't rush her. He didn't count aloud. He didn't pressure her with urgency. The countdown existed only in her chest. Her mother spoke again, her voice strained with fury and fear. "If you don't open this door, you will regret it." Rose stepped forward. Not toward the door. Toward Rock. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. "If I do this, everything changes." "Yes," Rock said. "And you'll handle John?" she asked. "I already am," he replied. The certainty in his voice sent a shiver through her, not fear, but something dangerously close to relief. She took a breath. One deep, shaking breath. "If you believe no one deserves to be trapped in silence, hit like." The door rattled one last time. Rose lifted her chin. And for the first time, she didn't move to open it. The door opened. Not gently. Not ceremonially. It opened with tension still clinging to its hinges, with the weight of expectation pressing in from the hallway beyond. Rose stepped forward before anyone else could speak, before apologies could be offered on her behalf, before the moment could be softened or reframed. The corridor outside was crowded. Her mother stood closest, face flushed, eyes sharp with fury barely disguised as concern. John was just behind her, jaw tight, lips pressed into a line that spoke of control slipping away. A few wedding guests lingered farther back, curiosity outweighing manners, whispers already forming. Rose felt every pair of eyes land on her. She didn't look at the bruise in their reflections. She didn't look at her mother. She looked at John. "I'm not going through with the wedding," she said. The words landed cleanly. Clearly. Without apology. For a moment, no one moved. Her mother blinked as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Rose," she said sharply, "you're not thinking clearly." "I am," Rose replied. John laughed once, short and incredulous. "This isn't funny." "It's not meant to be," Rose said. The hallway seemed to contract, the air growing tight as realization rippled outward. Guests leaned in. Someone dropped a program. The minister hovered uncertainly, already sensing the inevitability of what was happening. John stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," Rose said quietly. "I'm embarrassing you." The shift was subtle, but undeniable. For the first time since she'd met him, John didn't know which response would restore control. "You don't get to do this," he snapped. "We have contracts. Agreements. People waiting." "I'm not an agreement," Rose replied. "I'm a person." Her mother reached for her arm. "Rose, stop this. Think about your father." Rose turned to face her, and something in her expression made her mother hesitate. "I have," Rose said. "For years." John's patience snapped. "This is over," he said, anger bleeding into his voice. "You're coming back in there. Now." He reached for her. Rock moved. He didn't shove. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped into the space between them, calm and immovable, like a door that refused to open no matter how hard it was pushed. "That won't be happening," Rock said. John looked at him fully for the first time. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. Rock met his gaze evenly. "Someone who knows exactly who you are." A flicker of recognition passed across John's face. Fear followed quickly behind it. "No," John said slowly. "You can't be." "I am," Rock replied. He turned slightly, just enough for the others to hear. "As of earlier today, I acquired the outstanding debt on your family's commercial properties," Rock said calmly. "All of them." The hallway went silent. "That's impossible," John said, his voice tightening. "First National was motivated," Rock replied. "Triple value tends to do that." Rose's mother inhaled sharply. "You're bluffing," John said. Rock didn't argue. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and held it up just long enough for John to see the screen. Color drained from John's face. "That debt is callable," Rock continued. "Immediately. Especially under clauses related to criminal behavior." John laughed, but the sound cracked. "Criminal behavior? You have nothing." "I have security footage," Rock said. "From your building's parking garage. 3 nights ago." Rose felt her stomach drop. "You struck her hard enough to knock her into a vehicle," Rock continued evenly. "Your building manager was very cooperative once he realized I might purchase the property." The whispers erupted all at once. John's composure fractured completely. "You set me up," he hissed. "No," Rock said. "You exposed yourself." John lunged forward. Rock didn't flinch. "If you take one more step," Rock said quietly, "I release the footage. Along with statements from 3 other women who signed settlements to keep quiet." That did it. The fight went out of John all at once. He stood there, humiliated, stripped of the power he'd relied on for years, surrounded by people who were suddenly seeing him clearly for the first time. Rose watched it happen without satisfaction. Only resolve. "This wedding is over," she said again, louder now. "There will be no ceremony. No reception." The minister cleared his throat awkwardly and nodded. Guests began to disperse, conversations buzzing with shock and disbelief. Her mother stared at Rose as if seeing her for the first time. "You've destroyed us," she whispered. Rose shook her head. "No. I saved myself." John's eyes burned with something dark and unfinished as he turned away. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. Men like John don't forget. Rock stepped back, giving Rose space as the consequences began to unfold. The church doors stood open behind her, sunlight spilling in like an invitation rather than a demand. Rose took one step forward, then another. If you stand against men who use power to hurt others, comment enough, and hit the subscription button now. She didn't look back. The silence came later. Not the dramatic kind that followed the wedding's collapse, but the quieter, heavier kind that settled into Rose's life once the doors closed and the witnesses dispersed. The kind of silence that forced her to sit with what she had done, and what she had finally stopped doing. Her apartment felt unfamiliar that first night. Not because it had changed, but because she had. She stood in the center of the living room still wearing borrowed clothes, the wedding dress folded carefully and left behind like a relic from a different life. The walls were bare. The furniture mismatched. Nothing about the space tried to impress anyone. For the first time in years, neither did she. Her phone lay face down on the counter, vibrating intermittently with calls she didn't answer. Messages she didn't read. Her mother. John's family. People who wanted explanations, apologies, control. Rose poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, breathing slowly until the tremor in her hands faded. She was alone. The realization came with fear first, sharp and disorienting, then something else followed behind it. Relief. No footsteps in the hallway. No careful calculations before speaking. No need to measure her tone, her posture, her reactions. Just space. The next morning, she woke early out of habit, heart racing as if she'd overslept for something important. It took several seconds for the truth to settle in. There was nowhere she was required to be. She made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up without her. People moved with purpose, unaware that her entire future had split open the day before. It felt surreal, like surviving an accident no one else had noticed. Her phone buzzed once. A message, not a call. Rock, you home safe? She stared at the screen longer than necessary before replying. Rose, yes. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Rock, good. That was it. No instructions. No pressure. No intrusion. It steadied her more than she expected. The days that followed unfolded slowly. Deliberately. Rose moved through them like someone learning how to walk again, cautious but determined. She canceled accounts, postponed plans, reclaimed small pieces of her life that had been scheduled and structured around someone else's expectations. She took long walks without telling anyone where she was going. She slept with the windows open. She stopped wearing makeup. The bruise faded gradually, yellowing at the edges before disappearing entirely. But even when it was gone, Rose could still feel it, an echo, a reminder. Rock checked in occasionally. Never daily. Never too much. Sometimes it was a message asking if she'd eaten. Sometimes a short conversation about logistics she hadn't considered yet. Sometimes nothing at all. When they did meet, it was quiet. Coffee in neutral places. Conversations that didn't rush toward conclusions. Rock never sat too close. Never touched her unless she closed the distance first. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was with care. You didn't fall, he told her once, when she made an offhand joke about clumsiness. You were pushed. The words landed softly but stayed with her. She started telling him things she hadn't planned to say out loud. About the pressure she'd lived under. About how small her world had become without her noticing. About how fear could disguise itself as responsibility for years. Rock never interrupted. He didn't try to fix it. He simply acknowledged it. That, more than anything, changed the way she saw him. Weeks passed. Rose began rebuilding, not dramatically, not publicly, but intentionally. She revisited ideas she'd abandoned long ago. Photography. Independence. A life that didn't require her to disappear for the sake of others. Rock supported without steering. Offered resources without expectations. Stepped back when she needed space. Their bond grew in the margins, in shared silences, in late-night messages that said more by what they didn't demand than by what they did. It wasn't rescue. It was recognition. One evening, as they sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, Rose realized she wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. She wasn't bracing for control disguised as care. She felt calm. "I don't feel broken," she said suddenly. Rock looked up from his coffee. "You never were." She smiled at that. A real smile. Unpracticed. For the first time, her life didn't feel like something she was surviving. It felt like something she was choosing. But beneath the calm, something else lingered. An unease she couldn't quite name. Because men like John didn't lose quietly. And somewhere, beneath the peace she was building, the past was still watching. Waiting. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, quietly, the way danger often does when it knows it has time. At first, it came in envelopes. Legal stationery. Carefully worded notices. Motions filed and withdrawn. Requests for mediation that weren't really requests at all. John's lawyers moved methodically, probing for leverage, searching for a way to reassert control without drawing attention to the reason they'd lost it. Rose read each document once, then handed it to her attorney without comment. She had learned something important in the weeks since the wedding ended. Silence, when chosen deliberately, could be power. John, however, was unraveling. That part became obvious quickly. He had lost more than a fiancé. He had lost access. Reputation. Financial insulation. The quiet deference people once gave him when he entered a room. Rock's intervention hadn't just exposed his behavior, it had dismantled the structure that protected it. Men like John built their identities on dominance disguised as success. When that illusion cracked, there was nothing underneath to catch them. Rose heard about his spiraling through indirect channels. A mutual acquaintance mentioned he'd been seen drunk at a charity event he used to headline. A former colleague quietly withdrew from a partnership. His name stopped appearing in places where it once carried weight. John lost everything. And he blamed exactly one person. The first sign was subtle enough that Rose almost dismissed it. She noticed a car idling across the street from her apartment one evening when she returned from work. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. When she paused, keys in hand, the engine revved once before pulling away. Coincidence, she told herself. The next week, a message appeared in her inbox from an unfamiliar address. No subject line. No greeting. "You ruined my life." She didn't respond. Rock insisted on upgrading her security. Cameras. Reinforced locks. A routine that varied just enough to be unpredictable. "This isn't paranoia," he told her gently. "It's preparation." She trusted him. Still, the tension crept in. Rose began to feel watched. Not constantly, not dramatically, but enough that her body stayed half alert even during quiet moments. A shadow too close behind her in a parking garage. Footsteps that slowed when she slowed. Nothing she could prove. Everything she could feel. John's legal pressure intensified. Accusations of defamation. Claims of emotional distress. Attempts to frame himself as the victim of a calculated takedown. Each move was designed to exhaust rather than win. Rock countered efficiently. Calmly. Without escalation. But even he couldn't fully contain the emotional volatility of a man who had lost control. "He's not thinking rationally anymore," Rock said one night, his voice low. "That's when they're most dangerous." Rose nodded, the weight of the truth settling in her chest. She wasn't afraid in the way she once had been. Fear used to feel paralyzing, something that turned her inward. This fear felt different. It made her sharper. She started documenting everything. Times. Dates. Messages. Incidents too small to stand alone but heavy in accumulation. And still, life continued. Rose's work flourished quietly. Her independence solidified. She laughed more. Slept better. Built a version of herself that didn't flinch at raised voices or measure her worth in concessions. Rock remained steady beside her, not shielding, not controlling, simply present. Their connection deepened without urgency, grounded in mutual respect rather than rescue. But the past refused to stay buried. One night, Rose woke from sleep with her heart racing, the echo of a sound still lingering in the room. She sat up, breath shallow, straining to listen. Nothing. Just silence. She lay back down, forcing herself to breathe slowly, reminding herself she was safe. Across the city, John was unraveling completely. Witnesses would later say he'd been drinking heavily that night. That he spoke about injustice. About betrayal. About taking back what had been stolen. No one intervened. No one ever does until it's too late. Rose didn't know any of this yet. She only knew that the tension had reached a point where calm felt fragile. Like glass under pressure. And then. The crash came at 2 in the morning. If you hate abusers who refuse consequences, hit subscribe. The sound of breaking glass tore Rose out of sleep. Not a dream. Not distant. Sharp, violent, unmistakably real. Her heart slammed into full alert as shards scattered across the floor below, the crash echoing through the house with brutal clarity. For a fraction of a second, she lay frozen, breath caught in her throat, listening as the silence shattered into movement. Footsteps. Heavy. Unsteady. Multiple impacts where there should have been none. Beside her, Rock was already awake. He moved without hesitation, rolling out of bed with a fluid urgency that sent a chill through her chest, not because of fear, but because of recognition. This wasn't confusion. This was readiness. "Stay here," he said quietly, already pulling on jeans. His voice was calm, controlled, the kind of calm that meant things were very wrong. "Lock the door." "No," Rose whispered, sitting up. Her pulse roared in her ears. "I'm not hiding." Rock turned to her then, and for the first time she saw fear on his face, not for himself but for her. "Rose," he said, firm but gentle. "I need to know you're safe." Another crash sounded from downstairs. Louder. Closer. She nodded once. Bathroom. Phone. That was enough. Rock crossed the room in 2 strides and pressed a quick kiss to her forehead, grounding and fleeting. Then he was gone, slipping into the hallway like a shadow. Rose locked the bathroom door with shaking hands and called for help, forcing her voice to stay steady as she gave the address. The dispatcher spoke calmly, anchoring her as she pressed her ear to the door. Voices rose below. Angry. Slurred. Then one voice cut through the rest like a blade. "John." The sound of his name in her mind made her blood run cold. "You think you won," he shouted, words thick with alcohol and rage. "You took everything from me." Rock's voice answered, even and unflinching. "You destroyed your own life." Something heavy slammed into a wall. Wood cracked. Glass shattered again. Rose's stomach twisted. The dispatcher asked if she was safe. She didn't answer. She was already unlocking the bathroom door. Every instinct told her to stay hidden. To wait. To let someone else handle it. But she was done waiting. She crept down the hallway and stopped at the top of the stairs, heart pounding so hard she was sure it would give her away. The scene below burned into her memory. John stood in the center of the foyer, drunk and wild-eyed, his expensive clothes rumpled, his posture loose with fury. 2 other men hovered behind him, emboldened by his rage. One held a bat. The other gripped a tire iron. Rock stood between them and the stairs. Between them and her. John's eyes lifted and locked onto Rose. A twisted smile spread across his face. There you are, he slurred. Hiding behind him like you always did. Something inside Rose snapped into place. I'm not hiding, she said, her voice carrying clearly down the staircase. Rock stiffened. Rose. No, she said, stepping forward. I'm done listening. John laughed harshly. You ruined my life. You were supposed to be easy. A solution. I was a person, Rose said. You just never bothered to see that. The man with the bat shifted his grip. The tension thickened, coiled tight. You think you're brave now? John snarled. Without me, you're nothing. Rose's gaze didn't waver. You lost control, she said. That's all this is. John lunged. Everything happened at once. The man with the bat swung. Rock ducked, firing a warning shot into the wall that sent plaster raining down. The second man rushed in from the side, weapon raised. John ran for the stairs. For her. Rose didn't think. She moved. Her hand closed around the heavy ceramic vase by the stairway, solid, real, unforgiving. She lifted it with everything she had and hurled it downward. It struck John square in the chest. The impact knocked the air from him, sending him sprawling backward across the marble floor with a sickening crack. He gasped, stunned, scrambling for breath. Stay away from me. Rose shouted, her voice raw and fierce. From my husband. From my life. Rock used the distraction. He disarmed one man with brutal efficiency, slamming him into the wall hard enough that he crumpled. The second swung wildly, panic replacing confidence, and Rock twisted aside, knocking the weapon free, but not before the bat connected with his shoulder. Rock grunted, pain flashing across his face. Rose's heart seized. John struggled to his feet, rage and desperation twisting his features. This isn't over, he spat. Rock stepped beside Rose, injured arm tight at his side, his body a shield without hesitation. Yes, Rock said calmly. It is. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Red and blue lights flashed through shattered windows as officers flooded the house, guns raised, voices sharp and commanding. John and his accomplices were on the floor in moments, hands cuffed, fury dissolving into incoherent protests. The house fell silent except for Rose's breathing. Her legs gave out. She sank onto the stairs, shaking uncontrollably as the adrenaline drained away. Rock knelt in front of her immediately, ignoring his own pain. Are you hurt? He asked, scanning her face, her arms, her legs. She shook her head. You. He winced slightly. Maybe. Paramedics arrived soon after. A fracture, they said. Painful but manageable. He needed rest. Monitoring. Rose didn't let go of his hand. At the hospital, dawn crept in softly, pale light washing away the night's violence. They sat together in exhausted silence, the worst behind them, the future uncertain but open. Rose finally spoke, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I wasn't scared, she said. I was angry. Rock looked at her, eyes searching. That's different. Yes, Rose replied. It means I chose. 10 seconds. One choice. She hadn't been saved. She had saved herself. The arrest happened quietly. There were no raised voices when the handcuffs clicked into place, no dramatic speeches, no final threats shouted into the night. John stood in the back of the patrol car with his head bowed, his earlier fury replaced by something smaller and far more telling, defeat. Rose watched from a distance as the doors closed. She didn't feel triumph. She felt relief. In the days that followed, the noise returned, headlines, whispers, carefully worded statements from attorneys. But this time, Rose wasn't at the center of the storm. She didn't chase narratives or correct assumptions. She let the truth speak through process instead of performance. John was charged with breaking and entering, assault, and violation of a restraining order that had been filed quietly after the wedding collapsed. As the investigation deepened, more came to light. Past complaints resurfaced. Patterns emerged that could no longer be ignored or buried under settlements. Men like John depended on silence. This time, there was none. Rose gave her statement once. Calmly. Clearly. Without makeup, without embellishment, without apology. She described facts, not feelings. Actions, not excuses. The bruise was gone by then. No yellow at the edges. No shadow beneath the skin. But she remembered how it had felt, how she'd once treated makeup like armor, believing that if she concealed the damage well enough, it would stop being real. It hadn't. What stopped it was truth. The court proceedings moved faster than she expected. Evidence stacked neatly. Witnesses corroborated. John's attempts to regain control through legal maneuvering collapsed under their own weight. When the sentence came, it was decisive. Years, not months. The judge spoke plainly, without theatrics, about power abused and consequences delayed too long. About how wealth and status were not shields against accountability. Rose sat beside Rock, hands folded in her lap, listening without shaking. When it was over, she didn't look at John as he was led away. She didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Not because the past had disappeared, but because it no longer followed her. Rock asked her quietly if she was okay. She nodded. I am now. Justice hadn't erased what happened. It never did. But it had drawn a line. And on the other side of it, Rose stood unarmored, unhidden, and finally free. They married quietly. No grand cathedral. No crowded pews. No expectations pressing down from every direction. Just a small room, a few people who mattered, and a choice made freely this time. Rose stood beside Rock without lace weighing her down or lights burning into her skin. She wore a simple dress she'd chosen herself. Her face was bare, not because she wanted to prove anything, but because she no longer felt the need to hide. There was no armor left to remove. When they exchanged vows, there was no performance in it. No obligation. Just truth. Just intention. Just two people standing where they wanted to stand, not where they were told to. Later, when the day had softened into evening and the noise had faded, Rose found herself thinking about the moment everything changed. The collapse. The cold marble rushing up to meet her. The sudden silence after. The way her body had given out when her voice hadn't yet learned how to speak. For a long time, she believed that moment was weakness. Proof that she hadn't been strong enough to endure what was asked of her. Now she understood it differently. You didn't fall because you were weak, Rock told her once, when she finally said it out loud. You fell because your body knew the truth before you were ready to admit it. The words stayed with her. She had collapsed because something inside her refused to go any farther. Because survival had demanded an interruption. Because silence had become heavier than fear. She hadn't been saved that day. She had been revealed. Rock didn't see her as someone fragile who needed protection from the world. He saw her as someone who had survived it, and chosen to step out of its shadow. He didn't catch her so she could lean on him forever. He caught her so she wouldn't disappear. Their life together wasn't perfect. It wasn't free of tension or memory or caution. But it was honest. Built slowly. Deliberately. Without force. Rose worked. Created. Laughed. Took up space without apology. She no longer measured her worth by how quietly she endured. And Rock stood beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, exactly where he belonged. Sometimes, when she thought back to the church, to the bells and the pressure and the suffocating certainty that her life was being decided for her, she felt a strange gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the moment it finally broke. Because that collapse didn't end her story. It began it. If you believe kindness should never be punished, comment, I stand with Rose. If you believe abusers should always face consequences, share this story. Some silences are deadly. Some courage only takes 10 seconds. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is refuse to stand back up where they were pushed to fall.